Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Please recognize Representatives Biggs and West Rick for a special presentation.
The representatives are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Floor Leader. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If the clerk could please read the citation, or the resolution, I'm sorry.
The clerk will read.
Whereas on April 19, 1995, at 9:02 a.m., a terrorist detonated a truck bomb at the Alfred P. Murrah Federal Building in Oklahoma City. And whereas this was one of the worst terrorist attacks ever to occur on United States soil, taking the lives of 168 people and injuring more than 850 others, many of them United States government employees who worked at the Alfred P. Murrah Federal Building. And whereas this cowardly act of domestic terrorism directly affected thousands of families and horrified millions of people across the state and across the nation. And whereas the people of Oklahoma and the United States responded to this tragedy through the remarkable efforts of local, state, and federal law enforcement personnel, firefighters, search and rescue teams, public and private medical personnel, and other emergency services personnel, and thousands of volunteers from the community who saved lives, assisted the injured and wounded, comforted the bereaved, and provided meals and support to those who came to Oklahoma City to offer assistance. And whereas this courageous response set what has to come to be known as the Oklahoma Standard, which was later emulated by many Americans following the terrorist attacks on September 11, 2001. And whereas the following 1995 attack, the people of Oklahoma and the United States pledged to build and maintain a permanent national memorial to remember those who were killed, those who survived, and those changed forever. And whereas this pledge was fulfilled by establishing the Oklahoma City National Memorial, which draws hundreds and thousands of visitors from all around the world every year to the site of the attack. And whereas the inscription on the wall of the Oklahoma City National Memorial reads, "We come here to remember those who were killed, those who survived, and those who are changed forever. May all who leave here know the impact of violence. May this memorial offer comfort, strength, peace, hope, and serenity." And whereas the Alfred P. Murrah Federal Building has been replaced with a new, safe, secure, and functional federal building in downtown Oklahoma City that houses many of the offices once housed in the Murrah Building, sending a message that the people of the government of the United States will not be cowed by terrorists. And whereas the 22nd anniversary of the terrorist bombing of the Alfred P. Murrah Federal Building is April 19, 2017. Now therefore be it resolved by the House of Representatives of the first session of the 56th Legislature that the Oklahoma House of Representatives sends its heartfelt remembrances to the families, friends, and neighbors of the 168 people killed in the terrorist bombing of the Alfred P. Murrah Federal Building in Oklahoma City. That the Oklahoma House of Representatives encourages all citizens of the state to pause for 168 seconds on April 19, 2017, to remember the 168 people who died in this senseless tragedy. That the Oklahoma House of Representatives sends its heartfelt remembrances to those injured in the bombing and expresses gratitude to the thousands of first responders, rescue workers, medical personnel, and volunteers from the community across the nation who answered the call for help on the morning of the attack and in the days and weeks thereafter. That a copy of this resolution be sent to Carrie Watkins, Executive Director of the Oklahoma City Memorial and Museum.
Representatives.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, with me today to help celebrate and honor one of the victims, my mother-in-law, Dr. Peggy Clark, is her family, friends, and some family watching online. We have with us today Miss Mary Sperlin. It was her mother, her sister, Miss Susan Winchester, my father-in-law, her husband, David Spencer. Also joining us is her middle daughter, Blaine Arthur, her son, Kelton, and her husband, Jared Arthur. Watching online is her youngest daughter, Chelsea Evans, and also watching is my wonderful wife, Dr. Rosalind Biggs. We're also honored to have two of her very close best friends and family to us all, Miss Donna Smith and Miss Lee Denny, joining with us today. Members, each day in April, the state takes a moment, we pauses, we remember the victims, or the victims of this horrible day. But for many of the friends, many of the families, it's sharing the stories about the ones that have gone. It's sharing the stories with our youngest generation, those who may have learned about this in textbooks instead of remembering exactly where they were on this day 22 years ago. It's with the family and friends. Members, we do this every day with our kids, with our family. Share the stories, share the experiences, make sure the victims are not forgotten. It's our honor and it's our privilege today to be joined by another one of our colleagues who has his own story and would like to take this moment to share that with you as well. Please recognize Representative Rick West.
Representative, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. 22 years ago, today's that day. I've never talked about this to just very few people. My wife and my family, and I certainly never thought that I'd be saying it here on the House floor, but I think it's fitting that today I do that. This date brings back a lot of emotions for me, as I know it does many others, but it's especially today and every day, every April 19th, because on April 19th, 1995, I was an employee for the U.S. Department of Agriculture, Veterinary Services, and our office was on the 5th floor of the Murrah Building. So, being a field worker, I wasn't in Oklahoma City a lot, but for 20 years I knew those people that worked in our office, and I became very close to them. So when Timothy McVeigh carried out his terror attack, I lost 7 of my colleagues and friends that day. One of the things that I remember about that is later on was going to so many funerals. You just couldn't get away from it. And I know these fine folks up here, and it's just so hard to talk about it, and it's been 22 years. So what I'd like to do today is just honor those 7 people that died. Olin Bloomer, Jim Bowles, Peggy Clark, Dick Cummings, Adele Higginbottom, Carol Cahill, and Rita Long were needlessly killed in an event that I will never forget. Olin Bloomer worked as a budget assistant who loved the outdoors and a good joke. He left behind a daughter when he was killed that day. Jim Bowles was an administrative officer at the department. He was an Army veteran who had experience working for USDA in 4 other states before he moved to Oklahoma. His wife and 2 sons lost their husband and father that day. Peggy Clark was a veterinary medical officer who made a last-minute decision to stop by the office that day to make sure her work was complete. She left behind her husband and 3 daughters. As Scott said, and one of those was his wife, who went on to become a veterinarian. And she works for USDA Veterinary Services like her mother did, and it was my honor to work with her mother, and it was my honor to work with her. Dick Cummings was a senior investigator for USDA who helped ensure that animals were being treated humanely. He left behind a wife and a daughter. Adele Higginbottom was a typist and a purchasing agent for the department, and she was in charge of the office's Federal Women's Program, and left behind a husband and 2 stepchildren. Carol Cahill was an export document examiner who could catch any mistake that came across her desk. Her daughter Heather lost her mom 22 years ago today. And Rita Long was a program clerk who loved going to the theater. She was thoughtful and kind and was dedicated to her church and family. These people were good people. They weren't spies. They weren't ill-intentioned. They were fathers and mothers and daughters and sons who were working for the government. And that's why they were killed. They were working for the government. And they were providing for their family. Their lives, along with the lives of 161 other people, were cut short that day. We will never know what might have been. We will never know what could have been. I think of these people, these colleagues of mine often, especially this time of the year. I think of the ways that USDA employees and the rest of the people inside that building were just simply doing what they were supposed to be doing. They were public servants who served for the good of the people. And they lost their lives because of a needless act. It's easy to take things for granted as we go about our lives. It's easy to get caught up in what we do here. But life is bigger than what we do in this chamber. But in honor of these folks today, of these people, of these 7 people who lost their lives 22 years ago today, let's be sure to remember how fortunate we are. And let's pray for those who were victimized in this bombing. May we never raise a generation that doesn't know about the Oklahoma City Murrah bombing. May we never do that.
You know, when we look at kids who are graduating college, who some of them weren't even born in 1995, so they don't have any direct specific memories of that particular day and how it impacted. And then of course I've got my son here with me today, and he's just 8. And that's a story that we tell at home, that we talk about my mom with our family and talk about that day. But I think why it's so important that we have generations understand that is because our response here in Oklahoma to that awful hate crime was a response of love and compassion, and that we weren't going to let something so horrible destroy us here in Oklahoma City. And I think that's why it's so important for generations to hear that story and really, really see that story in person there at the memorial, because it's a very good lesson in the day and time that we're in now, that hate isn't the answer to the challenges that we have.